Hey, proletarians, members of the revolutionary class, welcome to Socialism for All. Today we're doing an audiobook and discussion of the Arditi del Popolo by Antonio Gramsci from 1921. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe and consider supporting us on Patreon. There's a link in the video description to the Patreon. So this is an audiobook in our fascism series called The Arditi del Popolo by Antonio Gramsci, Italian communist. This is from 1921 during the rise of fascism, when the world socialist movement was trying to understand and defeat fascism. The source is L'Ordine Nuovo, 15 July 1921, translated by Ben W. Thanks, as usual, to the Marxists Internet Archive at Marxists.org for hosting this and thousands of other free Marxist texts. Please go check them out and support them. So before we get into the text itself, which is pretty brief, I just want to give background on two of the names. The first is the namesake of this article, the Arditi del Popolo. That is roughly translates into English as the beloved of the people. This was an anti-fascist group which grew out of a World War I era, which was of course right before this, Italian combat unit called the Arditi. They were supposedly some of the most feared shock troops in the war. And then also Mingrino was one of the founders of this anti-fascist Arditi del Popolo group. So that is what Gramsci is writing about here. Now let's get into the text. The declarations made to the press by the Honorable Mingrino regarding his support for the Arditi del Popolo are tremendously useful as a means of highlighting the Communist Party's statement on the same subject. Mingrino's declarations correspond to the antiquated, threadbare psychology of the Socialist Party that we previously baptized Neo-Malthusian. Comment, Malthus was a, I want to say, late 1700s, late 18th century philosopher who stressed that capitalism was going to lead to overpopulation. It was heavily tinged with religious influence and basically this idea that human beings are like a disease on the planet, that kind of thing. If you've heard anything like that we need to support depopulation, these are neo-Malthusian ideas. They tend to oppose progress on the basis that too many people is a problem. Now, we would say as socialists that the concentration of too many people in one place in a megacity, that's not good. That is a product of capitalism, though. Wage workers get pulled into the cities after they can't survive out in the rural areas, and then you wind up with this ridiculous over-concentration of people living in abject poverty. That's really different from overall overpopulation, and that's a product of capitalism. Marx's idea, going back even to the very early days of Marx, was that socialism would lead to a gradual lessening of the distinction between urban and rural areas, because all of the good things would no longer be concentrated in the cities, but would be spreading everywhere. And of course, capitalism gives the opposite. It's a symptom of the inequality that people get herded into giant, disgusting megacities and live in terrible, terrible conditions. It's everything that we are against as socialists. Continuing. If Mingrino's conception were accepted, it would be fatal. The movement of the Arditi del Popolo would be doomed to tread the same path as the metal workers in September 1920, when they were led into the field of illegality and were placed in a position where they could only resist by arming themselves and by violating the most sacred privileges of capitalism. But then, suddenly, it was all over, because the factory occupations only proposed trade union goals. The Honorable Mingrino is joining the Arditi del Popolo. He gives to the institution his name, his status as a socialist deputy, and his personal prestige. The revolutionary proletariat regard him warmly for his conduct during the fascist attacks on Comrade Misiano. But what is the mission of the Arditi del Popolo, according to Mingrino? He believes it should limit itself to being a counterweight to the fascists' violence. It should be a, quote, pure resistance. It should, in sum, have purely trade union goals. Does the Honorable Mingrino still believe that fascism is merely a superficial manifestation of post-war psychosis? Is he not yet persuaded that fascism is organically bound to the current crisis of the capitalist regime, and that it will only disappear with the elimination of this regime? Is he still not convinced of the need to assign a purely marginal significance to the patriotic, nationalist, and reconstructionist ideologies of Mussolini and co., of the need instead to see fascism in its objective reality, free of any preconceived schema, free of any abstract political model? Fascism is a spontaneous swarm of reactionary energies that coalesce, dissolve, and then reassemble following the official leaders only when their orders correspond to the inner nature of the movement. This is what it is, regardless of the speeches of Mussolini, the statements of Pasella, and the war cries of all the idealists in the world. To launch or join a movement of popular resistance while setting in advance limits to its expansion is the gravest tactical error one could commit in this moment. It is vital not to create illusions among the popular masses, who suffer cruelly. Their miserable living conditions incline them to delusions, to the belief that they can alleviate their pain simply by shifting their position. They must not be encouraged to believe that a little effort will be enough to save them from the dangers that hang over all working people today. They must understand, they must be compelled to understand, that today the proletariat does not only confront private associations, but it confronts the entire state apparatus, with its police force, its courts, and its newspapers that manipulate public opinion according to the desires of the government and the capitalists. They must understand that which was not well understood in September 1920, when the working people overstepped the bounds of legality, yet fail to find the necessary spirit of sacrifice and political capacity to carry their actions through to a conclusion. They will be punished with firing squads, with hunger, with cold, and with starvation that will kill them slowly day after day. Are the communists opposed to the Arditi del Popolo? On the contrary, they aspire to the arming of the proletariat, to the creation of an armed proletarian force that is capable of defeating the bourgeoisie, and of standing guard over the organization and development of the new productive forces generated by capitalism. The communists are also of the opinion that when one engages in struggle, it's no use expecting victory to be guaranteed by a notary certificate. Many times in history, people have found themselves at a crossroads. Either they can choose to languish as they die slowly of starvation and exhaustion, littering their own streets with a few corpses each day, until as the weeks, months, and years pass, a mountain of bodies accumulates. Or they can risk everything, including their lives, and throw themselves into an all-out battle. They would then risk winning, halting the process of dissolution with a single blow, and beginning the work of reorganization and development that will at least secure future generations a little more tranquility and well-being. On such occasions, it was the people who had faith in themselves and in their own destiny that were saved, those that faced the fight audaciously. But if the communists think this, as regards the objective facts of the situation, as regards the relation of forces with the enemy, as regards the possibility of mastering the decay and chaos created by the imperialist war, as regards all the elements that one can't make an inventory of, and about which one can't always calculate exact probabilities, they do at least desire that the political goals are clear and concrete. They don't want a repeat of what happened in September 1920, at least not that part of it which can be foreseen, which can be assessed, and which can be preempted with political activity organized by a party. The workers have a way of expressing their opinion. The socialist workers, who are revolutionary, and who have drawn lessons from the experiences of recent months, have ways of exerting pressure on the Socialist Party to compel it to stop equivocating and taking refuge in ambiguities, to force it to assume a clear and precise position on this problem, in which the actual physical safety of the worker and the peasant is at stake. The Honorable Mingreno is a socialist deputy. If he is a sincere man, as we believe, then he will take the initiative to overcome the torpor and indecision of the masses who still follow his party. But he will not put a limit on their development, unless he wants to be responsible for procuring for the Italian people a new route and a new fascism, many times worse than before, with all the vengeance that the reaction will unleash on the irresolute and the indecisive after it has massacred the assault troops of the vanguard. That's the end of the audiobook. Pretty clear message here. If this is your entry point, please go check out some of either the Bordiga text that we've already done or either of the Zetkin that we have uploaded in the last couple of weeks, in which they explain more fully the situation. Basically, in 1919, you had factory occupations after the war, real close to a socialist revolution, and then the leadership, which was reformist, let everybody down, which really just opened the door to a huge amount of reaction, including the organization of the fascist movement. So pretty clear communique here from Gramsci to Mingrano. And what do you think? Leave a comment below. We're going to call it there and thank our current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to support Socialism for All, head to patreon.com/Socialism for All. You can sign up for as little as $2 a month. If donations aren't your thing right now, liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting are also helpful for boosting the channel in the YouTube algorithm and helping more people to see this content. We do need many more working people to get involved in the struggle against capitalism. A lot of that starts with education, and that's the stage that we're at. Onward to Revolution 2030. We'll catch you on the next video.